At some point, I'll share my screen and try to illustrate some of the points if I can. Um, you may have to turn off your camera. Um, there'll be a session where you meet your teams where you can turn on camera for those things because we are recording it. So you can put mute your cameras for now. Okay. I believe everyone on call have learned about software development cycle, and every software that we reproduce or any application that we produce goes through a life cycle. And in that life cycle, we have two distinctive ways of developing those software. We have the traditional method and we have the iterative method, or some call it incremental method. And that these two branches, there are other sub branches with under it. So under the traditional one, we can sometimes have waterfall and we can have V model in there. By far, maybe waterfall will be the one you hear a lot. Um, then in the iterative or agile approach, there are so many methodologies that we use. Some will use Kanban, some will use Scrum. In this training, you are learning about the Scrum, and there are other variations or combinations of other iterative method. So some may use methods that are in conjunction with Scrum. Okay, so they may be doing um, using Scrum methodology, but they will incorporate what we call BDD, which is behavior driven development. Or if they haven't got to that level, or the company hasn't got to that level, they may use the traditional one, which is the TDD. There are some companies who will use certain models specific for certain projects. Maybe it's a short-term project or a research project. Uh, Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can mute. Please, if you can mute yourself, Olamide. I think there's a background noise. Thank you. Yeah, so please, when you join, try and mute yourself, because any distraction, we are recording it and it just won't be nice when you're playing it back. Let me try and get and I'm going to share my screen a bit. So so this SDS means software development cycle. And in some jobs applications or job adverts, you see SDLC if they don't want to write the whole full meaning, but it means software development cycle. It's different from testing life cycle. Okay. And I say the SDLC, we have two main types. Okay, we have two main types. The first one is a traditional. Okay. and we have the, I think most of you have done this already, the agile or um, iterative approach. This, we call them approaches because the way they look at software development is totally different. In the agile, in the traditional, things follow sequentially. You have to finish one step before you go on the next step. But in the agile or iterative model, it doesn't follow sequentially, because there are frequent changes, and the application is developed in what we call sprint cycles in most situations, or they have a specific target that usually they tend to be short release cycles that they release the item. So, for example, most of you are, I think by now you are in sprint 3, sprint 2, or sprint 3. And at the end of every 2 weeks, you have a demo to release something. Now, under this, I said we have the waterfall, which most of you know already, the waterfall, and we have the V model. V model. Sorry if I'm coughing and you later hear it in the video. I'm not feeling that good. Um,
Sorry.
and in this iterative approach, we tend to have different models. There are many. Some are not even peculiar to software testing. They have some spiral models and other models that we don't even use, but there are so many of them. We have the Kanban. We have the Scrum, and we have um, Extreme Programming XP. Okay, let me. I may not explain all of them. I'll just explain the ones that we need because we want to look at ATDD, BDD, but I want to break it down so that you understand the background of how these things work and how it will apply to your work situation. I will explain because we are going to use we are going to use BDD, so I will emphasize a lot on BDD, especially as we're going to automate in BDD scenarios. Um, so we have rational unified approach, RUP, um, RUP. Then we have RAD, rapid application programming and development. Sorry, RAD. Some of these things you will not hear it, and there are situations where you may even be using this and you may not be aware that you are using it. In some companies they will not actually tell you that that's what they are doing, but they'll be doing a form of this. In some will add TDD or BDD in this, um, BDD and TDD, to to the iterative, but I like to separate it, and I will explain the reason before, because you can see with this particular one, they are more to do with the flow of the work items and the ceremonies you perform. So in Kanban, um, they don't have a lot of ceremonies like Scrum, okay, but they move items on the board. So it shows the flow of work. So although you are using even Scrum, the board that you see on your Agile, your Azure DevOps is a Kanban board. So it's a way you track the flow of items or work items. Some people, when they are doing Kanban, they don't really have a definite 2 weeks cycle that they have to repeat themselves. There are situations where people combine this together and they'll call it scrum ban. But you don't hear it often. But there are situations where people, they may not do full ceremonies like how you are doing daily stand up and other things, okay, and retro and other things, but they will still be releasing every 2 weeks as if it's a scrum. You get it? They'll have short sprints and they'll be releasing in maybe 2 weeks or 4 weeks cycle, but they will not be doing the same ceremonies. So every company will do what is suitable for them as long as they see progress in what they are doing. But when we come to this BDD, TDD approach, these are more of development approach on how we write the user stories and how we create our development task. So I'm going to start with this TDD. The TDD, the full definition means test driven. My slide had all the information in it. It means test driven development. And in the test driven development, a each route starts from extreme programming in the 70s and 80s, where most of the big companies, Microsoft, Oracle, were coming out with applications for Windows and database. they they needed to test their code. At that time, we didn't have a lot of testers like today, how we define testing as a role and as a career. So the developers had to test their code, and the way they write the code is uh, one second, let me see if I can practically show something. Okay, right. Sorry, because of the presentation, I was using a different laptop because my other laptop, the presentation doesn't work properly when I'm using. So, and the Visual Studio here wouldn't open because it's an enterprise edition. Um, so sorry about that, but I'm going to. So let's see if there's a C sharp code like this, console.writeLine. Okay. Um, it's supposed to be in capital. Okay. They are writing lines of code like this, okay, what they needed to do was to check if the code is working by adding some assertion. And on Friday, if I can, I'll show you a simple code of how you can write like using n units, a TDD. I don't know if I should join in with the other laptop. Um, so it will give you an assertion, assertion as assert that is false, assert that is true. Okay, and by default, it will pass the test, okay? Or sometimes the test will fail, okay? It will fail the test because you haven't written any code. So you will notice that in your sprint cycle, you've been given some stories and now you are going to automate. There are times when the developer hasn't written the code, but you are expected to write your BDD scenario and translate them into step definition. Okay. Now, what will happen is that because your code doesn't have any um, elements, web elements for you to use, sometimes when your code is running, it will skip or it will just kind of it will skip or it will show that your code has failed to run because it doesn't have the element for it to select when it goes to the website. You only have the URL. So the whole approach is that they write it in a form of um, test, um, write code, test code, then pass or fail. And as they are writing this, it sorry, um, if Ola is there, you can admit people for me. I can see a lot of people waiting on the call. So if you can um, do that for me, the coordinator. Thank you. So they write the pieces of code, then they write an assertion to test the code whilst they are building the application. Then it will either pass or fail. And as they are doing it, that's how they build the code. So they start with the approach that you test first, okay, and build the code. So as you are writing the code, you are testing each line of code. And this is how they came about with unit tests. Unit tests, because the code are small snippets. Okay, so they can write whether it's a pass or fail assertion just to check that line of code is working. So if they have to write a code for filling in a form for prep major or long reach, and you have to fill in a form, they write an assertion for that. If you use a valid code, is it a pass or fail? In these scenarios that they do it because there isn't a clear defined acceptance for them. There isn't a clear defined acceptance. And most of you have already seen acceptance criteria as all the boss. But in those times when they used to do this TDD, there wasn't something like acceptance criteria. The acceptance criteria is telling you that this is what the product owner will agree as the minimum for the product to function or for them to release. Okay. So in these scenarios, they will have a story like fill in a form and they'll code the form to have your first name, your last name, and everything. But is that enough? But as long as the requirement comes with an acceptance criteria that the people filling the form for Blue Sky Citadel, the minimum age we want is 18, or the minimum age for people to join the internship is 12. Now they are going to write the test based on those acceptance criteria. They will not just write the unit test code, whether it's just pass or fail for that line of code. They are going to test it based on that acceptance criteria. So this TDD and ATDD, acceptance test driven development, the main difference between it is that in this acceptance test driven development, there's a certain criteria that they have to write the test. So you can work in Scrum and your company may be doing this. They may be doing this, or they may be doing the BDD that will go into it. Sorry. So now we are going to give the acceptance criteria for the filling the form. Okay. Let me reduce the age. Maybe the minimum is 12 years. The person has to be a student. The person has to must paid at least a deposit. Okay. So let's imagine we have these three as the requirement for joining Blue Sky Citadel, that you have to fill the form. The prep major, you have to fill the form in prep major. Apply. Apply for Blue Sky Citadel. So again, another difference I've mentioned already is because in this test driven, when the developers are doing the test driven, they may not have the requirements like this. Okay, they may not have requirements that will have acceptance criteria. Sometimes they may have it, but they can still write their unit test just to check the form. So if the form where you have to fill in your name, I think most of you have to do it. Where you have to fill in the first name. So I'm going to give you another proper example again. First name. Now, the first name text field, okay, if they are writing TDD and you are a tester and you want to, I will next time I'm going to go to the website just to see how it will work, the prep major website. This name, if I write my name as Kwame and the developer did not test this, whether this name field should not be empty. He didn't write any unit test code for an assertion or validation. The real name that we use is um, validation. So if you are filling the form and you see asterisk or mandatory fill, we like to call it validation because I should not be able to submit a form without a name. You get it? It should not be accepted. But sometimes the business analyst may not be able to capture it that way. You get it? But as a tester, we have to think beyond what the business analyst and sometimes ask ourselves question. The fact that the business analyst did not say that when a person is filling a form, there must be a mandatory field for the name, for the date of birth, and other things, we have to test for that validation, whether front end or back end. But I don't want to go into that. But if the developer was writing the code and has put a unit test to check that there's a validation field, um, in the front end, you see an asterisk. So if you try and fill the form without any name, it should throw an error. You get it? Or it should notify the user that you are missing a form. And both, I think we all bear witness anytime you are filling some application, whether it's bank application and you forget one line or you don't fill the form correctly, you get a message that go back and fill the form. And this is because in the code, sometimes they may have added validation tests in the background. There are times many of the developers will forget. So as we are in the testing role at the moment, think of all these possibilities. Now, this validation, it will not be most times captured as an acceptance criteria, because to the business analyst, these are the main key things when a person is filling the form they want to see. They want to see that this is the minimum years the students pay deposits, but they may not add validation to all those fields. You get it? But as we are testing, you have to test whether the number where it needs to pick people's email, the email field has a validation that it picks correct email for form. Age, it picks the correct form. How do you call it? Phone number field, it will pick the correct phone number. So if somebody put three numbers in there, it will not work. You get it? So in the ATDD, now if they are writing the test, they will test it against this acceptance criteria. Now, what makes this BDD scenario so different is that um, in the last couple of years, we've had um, a body of developers who, not developers only, but they are also business users, who thought that why not put um, the users.
We can hear you.
Thank you. I think I may have muted myself. Behavior driven development. In this behavior driven development, they are not ignoring acceptance criteria. There will still be acceptance criteria. But this approach looks at how we can develop software so that everybody in the team can understand it easily. So they use simple keywords and simple English words to describe how a user will use the software. So they will normally start with, as a user, I want, and so that, so they are describing everything that they are going to develop from the user perspective. And from this, that is not the end. They now describe some of the scenarios that, okay, at at in which scenario would this particular acceptance criteria be met when the person is 12 years. So if the person is less than 12 years, we should not be able to accept, maybe because of GDPR, legal registration, and all those things. So we should not allow people who are less than 12 years to join the internship. The person must be a student, maybe to get discount or something, and the person must pay a deposit to join Blue Sky Citadel. So what happens is that they describe the scenarios. In some situation, they may not describe all the scenarios that you need. They may put one or two scenarios. It's up to you, the tester, to come up with um, the remaining scenarios. So the fact that the business analysts have written one scenario, in some situation they will not even write scenarios for you. They will list the acceptance criteria. So over here we overtrain you, but in the real world, you'll be surprised that a lot of things we do, we make it so easy for you, but some companies you join and you'll be surprised that a big company like this, they don't do things the way you've learned from Blue Sky Citadel. So we'll give you experience from the work field, um, why some, I don't, not why, but how some companies will not apply this BDD in the proper way. You get it? So they will use what we call Gherkin syntax. Gherkin syntax or language. This Gherkin language is just like normal English language, okay, but it has some defined words that we use to describe the scenarios. So the scenarios will start with given, when, and then. Okay. So the given is mostly the precondition. The when is the action. Then this is the result or outcome. There's a reason why I've put space in between. Because when there are multiple precondition, instead of writing um given and another given for a second precondition, then another given for a precondition, we use a conjunction called and, okay, to bridge it. So because there are multiple preconditions, if you don't want to repeat yourself by using given, you use and. The same with the action. When there are multiple actions, for example, if somebody is filling a form, they'll fill the first name, they'll fill last name, they fill how many years, they fill whether they are a student or a worker, and if they have paid a deposit, all those actions that the person will be taking. If you don't want to write multiple when, you can join it with and. Okay. There are times too the outcome may not be only one single outcome. Instead of writing multiple, then you can write it with and. The only thing people don't use most often is but. You use the but in a situation where you want to talk about the opposite action or opposite result. But a lot of people don't use the but by far this is what you see. Um there are times when you join a company and you be working and they may not be defined things correctly like this. Some There are some people they will just write giving when and maybe when they may not even bring the then, you know. Because it, it doesn't look right, but it doesn't mean that the work that they are automating will not work, because this is just giving us um a proper ways to express behavior driven development. You get it? That is the standard. But you see a lot of people, I don't know how they got to do about using it in a way that doesn't sound right or doesn't look right. But you see in some situation that is not in the standard format that it needs to do. But when you are automating, um this will get annotated if When I say annotated, um, when we start using Specflow, there's a reason why we are installing Specflow in um, Visual Studio. Specflow, um, it, there's a company behind Specflow, and what they are doing is that since the inception of BDD development, BDD development approach, they've tried to help developers and testers to automate scenarios. So instead of writing a method to contain this particular action, they translate it on your behalf. Okay. So whatever you write here in your test automation framework, or whatever the business analysts have written for you, if you copy it and you put in your feature file and you use your Specflow to translate this particular English word, it will change into a code for you. And in that way, you are able to automate. So that is the main reason that we are using Specflow. Now, this is just for interview, because there will be situation where you attend interview and they will ask you what is the difference between cucumber, not the cucumber that we eat, cucumber and Specflow, and a lot of people get it confused. We use Specflow, this one, for C sharp automation. C sharp automation, and we use cucumber. This one is just, it looks like the same cucumber that we eat for Java. So please don't get it confused, because immediately you say this in interview and you don't get it right, they feel like whatever you are written on your CV is not right. They start to doubt you. So we are using Specflow for C sharp automation. Anytime they talk about Cucumber, you say that is for Java, and that is case close. Okay. They should ask a question on C sharp. So that is the whole essence of we using the BDD scenarios, um, and the BDD approach. One second. Any question so far? Give me 1 second. I'm going to re-log in, and I want to open Visual Studio, because the one I'm using, the Visual Studio, is Enterprise Edition, and it just wouldn't allow me to do that. Give me 1 second. So let me join into the meeting. Hello.
Hello, okay, we can hear you.
Thank
Hello.
you for bearing with me. I just quickly have to change
All right,
laptop
thank you.
because the
Thank you
Visual
very much.
Studio wouldn't open, so I can illustrate what I've been talking about. So this one should work. Now, once, so we're going to go to the practical aspect of it. Um, if I get the chance, I will introduce you into WebDriver. Okay. I don't know if I can do it or tonight. So if you integrate Visual Studio, let me go back one step and you go to create a new project. Okay. If you integrate Visual Studio, sorry, Specflow in your projects, you are likely to see Specflow projects. If it's your first time, you may not see these things because these are recent project templates. You can see on the top left corner is because I've used this previously. That's why you are seeing it there. You can pin it because maybe if it's your go-to template that you use for your project. Now, another way is that you can type Specflow in here in the search bar. For all of you who have Specflow integrated in your Visual Studio, if you downloaded it, you have to close your Visual Studio, then the actual installation will start. Okay, because the way Microsoft application usually works, especially Visual Studio, is that it has an installer. So when you download it, it doesn't mean that it's been installed in Visual Studio. So you have to close the Visual Studio for it to install in Visual Studio. Now, if you type Specflow because you are going to use BDD, the okay, because I should have started with the TDD so that at least I should, but I'll try and go back and do that one. So you get a template. This is a project template. If I do it like this, I can see different project templates. Okay, some can use console application to create application. Sorry, automation project and later add on BDD, but it's a long process. Some can use where is it? N unit test projects as well. This helps you to do TDD later on too. You can add spec flow into it, but it's long. By far, if you are going to use BDD approach, just go by spec flow. Okay, type spec flow in here. Click on next, and you can see there is a project name. Microsoft will automatically give you a project name, but ideally name your project based on your project work you are going to do in Blue Sky Citadel or at your workplace. So if your project is long reach, I prefer you call it long reach. Okay, so let's say it's long reach project. You call it long reach. The location, it will always like to save in repos. Okay, because the spec flow folder the Visual Studio folder, it goes into source and repos. Repos is a short form for repository. That means a place where large files can be kept. Okay. Ideally, don't direct it there. What you have to do is that create on your C drive um, a folder on your C drive, and you can navigate to that C drive. So if I click on this, it will give me C drive. Then you go to C drive or D drive. I partition my index, so um it can go to D drive. But ideally, let it stay on C drive. Don't go and partition your decks. That will be additional work. So please, but you create a folder on C drive. Then you can see I have e-commerce gate training repos. You create a folder. To create a folder, you right click this space over here. Then you go to new. When you are creating the folder, call the folder with a name of a repository. Because the project is called Long Reach Project, I'm going to call it Long Reach Repository. Okay. And pay attention to how I'm naming the files. It's important. Long Reach Project. You select the folder. Because I selected the Long Reach folder in my C drive, now you wouldn't see C drive users, blah blah blah, what is it called, repos, and that long distance address or location. You just see the name, the drive, and the project. That is the best way. That way you won't mix up things. Then you will see a tick here, place solution and project in the same directory. Most times it will be automatically tick. Don't worry about it, but I will explain solution and project later on when we open the console. So you go to create. You're going to see over here, create a new Specflow project. And you see framework 3.1 and test framework called Specflow.runner. There are options over there. Leave it as default. Okay. There's add fluent assertion library. Also leave it as default. I'm going to explain it later, but I just want us to jump into BDD so that we see an example of scenario. But if I'm going to explain this, it will eat up all our time, but I'll try and go back and explain it briefly. So I'm going to create a project right now. So yeah, we are getting the feedback.
Hello, Kwame.
Yes, hello.
Yes, please, I have a question.
We are getting the feedback. It looks like you are using two audio sources. Okay, let's see if it's created the solution for us. Okay, so you can see over here, we have on the top right corner, we have solution long range project, and we have long range project over here. This square or triangle box with the Visual Studio icon means solution, okay? And this square one with the test beaker in there means project. Now, in Microsoft, they describe large projects as solution. Within a solution, you can have multiple projects. So, for instance, I have long range projects. I can add another project. I can go to file and go to add, and I can add a project called Prep Major using Specflow. So I can add another project right now. I'm not saying to do it, but I'm just using it to explain, because when I went to Nest, there was an option to take add to project or solution. Okay, so let me try and cancel this and go back. So that's the main reason you are seeing it here. You can see one single project here. And if you have one single project, if you are compiling, it will tell you have one project. But if you have multiple projects or 5 projects, it will tell you when you are compiling or building your project, you have 5 projects. And if one of them fail, it will tell you which one has failed. Now, I don't know the interface most of you have, if you've gone through how to pin things, but I'm just going to go into feature file. Every time you use Specflow, it's going to give you a sample feature file, okay? Because you have installed Specflow in your Visual Studio, when you create a new project, it's going to give you a sample project. I think I'm using Visual Studio 2019. For those of you using 2022, it will be a little bit different. You see one of the folders over here will be called utilities. Okay. It will be slightly different, but it almost do the same thing. Um, Now, I mentioned about BDD that it will have a feature where it will be written in, as a user, I want to sign up to Blue Sky Citadel. Okay. Or as a user, I want to sign up to Blue Sky Citadel so that I can subscribe to software testing internship. And direct, they will have a scenario. The scenario will be that maybe a user should be able to join Blue Sky Citadel. Maybe that is the first scenario. Then under the scenario, you can see we have given. Okay, given is the precondition. This is another given. It's also a precondition, but they don't want to write the given twice. So anytime you see a given and an end, it means that this and this are the same. They are precondition, multiple precondition. And you can see here we have the when. If your Visual Studio has, you can change the theme color. Like currently I'm using bright theme, but I can change the theme to a dark theme. If you use a dark theme, this wouldn't look blue. It will look like white or something like that. Okay, so another time you see some people using different screen. Then over here you can see the then, which is the result. So what is telling us that if I have a first number and the number is 50, and I have a second number, okay, and the action over here is that I add the two numbers, I should get 120. Okay, that should be the result. Now, this is where, if we are writing the test, we have to write our assertion to test whether this is true or false, or this is what is predetermined as the outcome. Okay. Now, this particular feature file, it will be translated into what we call step definition. So this steps folder over here you are seeing here, it will have a corresponding feature file. So you can see the feature file is called calculator.feature. Let me expand it a bit. Calculator.feature, and the step definition is called calculator step definitions, or sometimes some people will call it calculator steps. Okay, calculator steps. We are going to go into calculator steps and see what is going to happen. You will notice that this same written English will be translated into a code. Okay, so let's click on that one. I'm going, if your Visual Studio, the text is really small, you can increase the text size over here. So I just want to decrease it so we can see the full context of what I'm going to talk about. But I hope people, everybody watching me can see. So if you see from line 18, this line 18, that is what is important. That given that we saw in this calculator feature, given the first number is 50, is the same thing that is written here. Okay, given. But because the given is a key Gherkin syntax word, it's not in bracket, it's in the square box, but the remaining is the code. Okay, that needs an implementation. Sorry, I need some water. If you look at line 19, line 19 is a duplicate of line 18. Okay, but line 19 all the way to 28, we call it method. Okay, in programming, if you want to execute a code, you have to put it into a method. Okay, in some programming language, they will call it a function. Okay, so we have what we call class and other things, but because our focus is on BDD, I just want to stay on BDD. Later on, I'll see if we can have time to explain class and other things, because you can see here this is a sealed class. Okay, we have namespace. Within a namespace, there's a bracket to show open and close, and within a namespace we have classes, and in a class we can have what we call constructors, fields, methods, and other um, enums and other things. Okay, there are a lot, quite a few of them. So from line 19 to line 28 is an is a code for this particular line 18. The same with line 31, line 30. Line 13 is what is here. Line 13 is what is on line 11. And the second number is 70. It's the same thing here. Given the second number is 70. Okay. Now you can see there are some things missing here. Okay. Why is the 70 not there? And why is it that when it got to the method, they didn't give us the number 70, but they gave us what we call an argument? And over here too, the same thing, it didn't give us the number 50 and 70. It just gave us another argument over here, because in coding, when you put in a number like this, or in BDD, if you change this to, let me add another line. Watch this. Let me increase the um mm, uh, so sometimes you can use single quote or this or double quote, but when it's numbers you don't need to do it like that, because it will pick it as something you are going to work with automatically. It knows it. So you don't need to put, but if it's in words like this, in C sharp, we call something we call string, or programming language, we have what we call string. Anytime you want to use a combination of letters or characters, including numbers or whatever, you put them in quotes like this. So this is telling me that I'm going to use this particular, oh, sorry, I have to do it in front. I'm going to work with this particular string as an argument. Okay. So over here, although is going to take this particular 50 and 70 in the step definition over here, it will replace it with an argument. Sometimes it will write P10. You are going to see it because some of you will, you'll be given an URL and you have to fill a form, and immediately you do your step definition, it will automatically give you this. This you don't have to do it, although you can do it. The help of Specflow will implement this for you. All you have to do is where it says scenario context dot pending. You can see here it says to do implement a precondition logic over here. So this is where you have to put your code. This bit, let me cut it off. This is where you have to implement your code. And as I told you, this is a method, and whatever you put here is what your code is going to do it for you. So in a short and a concise way, um, that's how I can explain Specflow, BDD, and just get you appetite for automation. I don't know. Someone wanted to ask a question, so I open the floor. If there's a question somebody wants to ask,
Hello.
yes, go on.
Yeah, I tried to follow you when you were opening your Specflow, but when it comes to the addition, where you had the additional information on your own, I saw net 3.1, but mine I don't have 3.1. I have instead net 3.0 and 7.0.
Um, yeah, I think maybe you are using Visual Studio 2022,
Oh yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah, so Visual Studio 2022 is not every when you are creating a project, it gives you that option. Um, I'm using the 2019 version. That's why I explained that there will be slight variance in how you do it. So let me go back. This is what our brother is explaining. Let me see if I can add another project, new project, and he's in here, Specflow, and So I'm going to add the project and call it spread long reach, or let me call it prep major. This framework is what he's talking about. Okay.
Yeah.
3.1. Okay. Um, the option he's seeing is that when you click on this down button, for Visual Studio 2022, you might see only .NET Framework or .NET 6.0. Um, if you see .NET Core 3.1, use it. There is some slight difference in this, because when you are creating project in C sharp, let me get a board. You need what we call .NET framework. Okay. You need the language, the C sharp language itself. Oh, let me zoom in because this may look too small for some people. You need the test framework. You need the assertion as well. So what's happening is that he's at the point where he has option. Microsoft has about 4 options at the moment. They have .NET framework, then they have .NET standard. The .NET standard was the old, but they still use it for some application. They have the .NET framework. They have .NET Core. And by far, the .NET Core is what I use a lot, and that is very helpful. But the .NET framework can also do the same thing. Then they have the .NET MAUI or whatever, which is a combination of mobile application. You can use it for mobile application, but this just came up about a year or 2 years ago. I think it's just 1 year old. So a lot of people are not aware of it. So that is the options it gives you. But if you have the .NET Core, use it. The .NET framework, sometimes when you use it and you are somebody's mic is on, if you can mute yourself, because I can hear myself.
Mm. Mm.
So the test framework over here, I'll come back to the .NET. So if you can see .NET Core 3.1, you can choose it. There's a way you can also implement it by going to the project and changing it to .NET Core 3.1. I can't remember it now, but there's a way you can bring in .NET Core. But if you can't use it, then you may have to use the .NET standard, which is 5.0. Mine is showing 5.0 over here. Maybe I haven't updated my um, framework for a while. Then .NET 4.8, use the highest one, which has the latest update. So in this 2019 version, I have 3 frameworks options, but by far use the 3.1 that is there. The test framework, because you are using Specflow, it gives you a default option of Specflow plus runner, okay, to help you to run your tests. Um, but you can use N units, you can use MS test, you can use X units. So you can see over here, if I click options, you see X units, N units, MS test. Now we are going to use Specflow runner, okay, but you may join a company that they are not using Specflow runner, or they may use a combination of Specflow runner plus N unit test in one test framework. Now, the Specflow runner, because we are using it, it will give you certain implementation. Let me try and do it now. And let's remove the accession library because we are using NUnit. It has its own accession. So I'm creating a new project, and so because I've added a new project over here, you can see now I have two projects in one solution. If I add another project, I can have another project again. You can have us. You will join some companies, they have about 32 projects in one solution. Not for you, the QAs, but for the companies, their software. If they have a lot of developers, they can have so many projects for different things. Um, Now, I haven't written any tests, but if somebody is sleeping, if I can mute the person, or if somebody can mute, yes. So because I use this time the N unit, if it gets to the level that I need to write tests, I may not need to use fluent accession because I didn't choose fluent accession, although I can add it on. We will show you how to add all those things. To add those things, there are three ways. You can click on solution and do it, but because the topic is about the foundations for TDD and other things, I don't want to go into it. But when you go to the solution or the project, because sometimes this project I didn't add Specflow accessions to it. So if I want to add Specflow accession just to prep major, I don't have to click the whole solution. I can go specifically to that and go to manage NuGet packages. If I go to NuGet packages, you can see here I have N unit already because I chose N unit. So I have the N unit test adapter N unit. So if I want to browse and add Specflow stuff, all I have to do is click on Specflow, type in Specflow, and I will see so many things for Specflow. So if I want to add Specflow N units, I can add all those types. The ones that are already installed it will be tick green. So because this prep major doesn't have that Specflow accessions, I can add it. If it's fluent accession I want to add, I can add it. So that gives you the option to modify your project anyway. Any other question? Sorry.
Hello?
Yes, hello.
Yeah, it's still me. On my additional information, I have net 6.0 long-term support and net 7.0 standard term support, and I don't have no test framework, so I don't know what to choose there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you don't have a test framework, you can add it later. Just like I'm showing right now that if this project, this first project, if you can mute yourself because I can hear myself. Thank you. Yeah. So the first project I created here, I did not add um any unit to it. So you can see here all I have fluent accessions. I have the .NET library. I have Specflow living doc, but I don't have N units. If I want to add the test framework called N unit, I can. I have to go to browse, and I can add N units to it. N units, which is here. N units. So the fact that the time you were selecting that option was not there, you can add it later. Okay, so but the N unit, if you're add the test adapter. Um, I don't want to go too advanced what it can do, but the way you run the test, it helps you to create certain things, especially for TDD, um, which for introduction, I don't want to go into it for now. Any other question? So
Okay. Please. My name is Okoyemi.
yes.
Okay. Yeah. So when you had the project, the long range, on your computer, is it that you've done everything before? Because when you open it, I mean, there's some feature like criteria, like given when then everything was there. When you click on that project, okay, yes, this place.
Okay.
Now, is it created it automatically, or how does it arrive
Uh,
here? Secondly,
mm,
where are we going to write it here, or we are going to write the code? Because where you are taking us to is different from here. And is it how we are going to write for automation? Is it how we are going to write at this screen? Is it how we are going to write our test for automation, or we are going to where you are now there's where there's they are interpreting all these things. We have to put our code, put all those things. How does it really work in the real world
okay.
settings? Yeah.
Okay. Because every one of you have installed Specflow in the Visual Studio. When you are creating your project, choose Specflow projects. Okay. Because you are using Specflow templates, it gives you Specflow templates. I'm going to create a new project without Specflow. So watch me. I'm going to create another one. It will still give me a template and it will give me a session and one of the TDD I was going to talk to you about. So let's say I'm creating a new project. You can see here, create a new project. This time I'm not going to use BDD to do it. Okay, so I'm going to use NUnit test projects. And this too, I can use it to automate and it will not have the scenarios in it. But I just want to show you that um, there are different ways of doing
Please,
it. So let me
please, can you go back 2 steps? Just 2 steps, please.
okay. When you come to create a new project, there will be so many templates. All these are templates, but I don't want to waste time and explain all of them. But if you scroll here on your right, there are so many templates for so many things because Visual Studio is a powerful tool for doing so many things. You can even use for creating databases and other things. So there are so many sample projects, okay? Because he was asking why when I created the project, there was a sample step definition and feature file. Is because Specflow has made it as an example for you, but you are not going to use it. Okay, you have to delete it for your project. But that is an example to show you how BDD works. Okay, so because they have templates for any project, if I'm going to use NUnit for automation and I come to NUnit test projects and I click on next and let me call this one also what is the other project thing we have, maybe gift rates. Gift rates. This time it's not giving me the test framework because I typed the test framework first because I knew I was going to use N unit as my way of doing my TDD test. So it's not giving me the option for test framework, but it's asking me what library of C sharp that I want to use. Okay, the C sharp family, Microsoft family of framework that I want to use to compile my code. These things helps you to, so you can see we have .NET Core 1.1 is out of support. All these things, they are out of support. Then we have .NET framework. But as I told you, the favorite one I like to use is .NET 3.1 because it has some advantages, but that's not the topic for today. So let me create a simple test for us. So on our right, you are going to see our solution. Okay. Our solution is gift rates and the project is gift rates. Okay. And in it, there's a sample class file. Okay. This C sharp, that little C sharp you see next to the unit test is a sample class file. This this is a simple kind of test, TDD test that they do. The test framework, you won't see it here, but if you go to project dependencies over here and you go to frameworks and packages, you see over here Microsoft SDK, NUnit, and NUnit test adapter. But you can see there's a sample test in here. This is a sample test. If I run this test, it will tell me that I've passed. Let me build it and see if I can. So this is the test. If I run it here, it's telling me that the test has passed. Although I haven't put any code in there, you can see there's a green tick here. It's telling me the test has passed, but it's up to me to add a code in here. With every test framework, there are what we call um it's like you are going to a laboratory. When you are going there, you have your test tools to use and how you prepare yourself, and when you finish, how you exit. You get it. So you can see we have setup over here that tells you to how you're going to set up your code. So there are certain things you want to do in the setup, and there are certain things you want to do in coding. We'll call it tear down. So because we are going to automate for browser, there are certain things we want to do to make our browser open, to go to Google and to open the browser. And there are certain things we want to do when the browser closes. So over here, they've added public void setup. But ideally, if I'm using the TDD way of doing and I put my WebDriver in here, all I have to do is to put, when I finish, I'll do public void tear down. Public void tear down. Okay. The method, you can call it any name. It doesn't. So I've just written a simple line of code in this NUnit TDD framework. We may not need to do the step definition because it's not needed. You don't need Specflow to change the given when then into a step definition for you to put in your code. This you code it as straight. So sometimes in some respect, TDD is even faster and straightforward, but it can be very confusing for the layman. If you don't understand coding and you see the code like this, you wouldn't understand it. But if you go to the other one, which is the BDD, at least if you don't understand this thing, and it's confusing. If you come to the calculator feature, at least you understand the feature by giving the first number is 50, the second number is 70. When I add both of them, it should give me 120. In TDD, the disadvantage is that everything is so um, raw and basic that you may not understand certain things. I'll give
Okay,
room for
please.
another question.
Okay, please. Here. Now, this is the template. So all we need to do is to erase, all this and to write our own here. And we can leave
Yes,
the given when then all this thing there. We can do all we need to do is just to erase this black one and put our own data there. We want to test, right?
exactly.
Okay.
If you want to add your own, which is not the topic for today, um, you have to click on features. You see,
Okay.
I've highlighted features folder.
Okay.
Then you go to add. You click on new item.
Okay.
Okay. And if you have Specflow installed properly, you should see Specflow in the options here. So you can see Visual Studio items, code, data, general, web, ASP.NET Core, Specflow.
Mm-hmm.
You go to Specflow. It will be slightly different from those of you using Visual Studio 2022 because some of these things are old school. So you won't see Dutch, English, French, German, and event bindings and all these things. I
Okay.
wanted to use the 2022. Let me see. I think I have 2022 installed, but it will take a long time to set it up. I think I have Visual Studio 2022. But whilst it's loading, let's do this one. So you come to the feature. What is the feature you are going to do? Maybe sign up to Blue Sky Citadel. Okay, sign up feature, or maybe yours is login or whatever. I don't know what you call it, but you can see I've chosen feature file. That is where you have to go. If you want to do step definition, you come to the step definition, but you don't need to do it because um, Visual Studio have a way you can translate everything to step definition without coming here to manually type it. It will generate this thing all for you easily. So you create a feature file like this, and you can see here is sign up. Now you go to your Azure, then copy your as a user. I want to register for Blue Sky so that I can train as a software tester. Okay. Some people will nicely um, do it this way. It's just the way you want to indent it. Some will just do it as they just want the eyes, but
Okay.
it doesn't matter. Now
Okay.
the scenario is like your test case. Okay, your test case should start with a positive test case. That is like, what do you want this thing to do? You want to sign up as a software tester. Now, if I use wrong details, I should not be able to sign up. If I use the wrong age, I should not be able because we said the minimum criteria is 12.
Mm.
We said this person should pay. If I don't pay, I should not sign up. You get it? So let's
Yes.
say you say verify I can sign up it can be long, but I'm just because of time sign up with valid details. So we're going to start with our positive scenario. Then given first name is Kwame and last name, you can see the name, the things are changing to purple.
Kwame,
Yeah.
is there any reason why it changed the purple?
Sorry.
Is there any reason why it changed for the color has changed?
Yes, because when we created the new file, it automatically created a step definition for us over here, which was also called calculator. You get it? It was something like, oh, why am I? It created a snippet for us, okay, and I've deleted the first line and I put this thing there, and you can
Okay.
see I'm deleting this line because
Okay.
it created a snippet for us, and that snippet was already in calculator feature. It was binding to this step calculator feature. That's why it was black. But because
Yeah.
this doesn't have a step definition, it will look purple. Okay.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I'm going to show you how we can do it later. My giving is not proper, but it has to be given. I've signed. I'm on the website because that should be the precondition. But let's assume my first name is Kwame because these are the actions. It should be when I enter first name Kwame. Okay, let
Okay.
me copy this and put it there.
Thank you.
Let's put this here. What is the website? Long Reach. Long Reach. Um, okay. So ideally, our giving should be that I'm on the website and I go to where to register. When I enter, some may add the form should open up, or they can say and the form open up or whatever. Sometimes they may not add those things because the business analyst may not see into details every step as when you start testing. So some of the things they will describe will just be I would say it'll be too um it will not be too direct, but it doesn't mean that when you are also going to the website, you should not add those steps or those elements to make your work easier. Then let's say I should be able to register. I should be able to register. Now, because these are actual data, this is an actual data. Um, I don't have to write it direct like this because maybe I may repeat this data all the time, okay? Or maybe somebody else want to sign up. It's not all the time Kwame will sign up. So in other words, sometimes you can put it in quotes like this. because it's a string data. Sometimes it can be single quotes. Let me try a single quotes and see. Sorry. Now, if I click on this particular line, okay, and I right click it, it gives me the option of go to definition, generate step definition, go to step definition. Okay. Now, if you go to generate step definitions with S, it will try to generate all step definitions for you, just like we saw in the calculator feature here. It generated all step definition for us. If it's your first, where is it? Prep major. Oh, sometimes you may miss a line that later on you want to add. So let's assume I've missed this line. Okay, I'm going to delete this line and we'll add it later. So let me go to generate step definition. You can see it's giving me only the 4 options. I've copied it. If I click on generate, you can add it to clipboards, create a class file and do it, but it's a long process. The best way is to go to generate. Be very careful, please. Be very, if there's anything you miss in today's class, check the time just before we are about to finish. Listen to the last 5 minutes of the training, because a lot of people will make mistakes here and I don't want them to make the mistake, because we see it time and over. You can see the project was long reach project. Okay, the last bit here is under features. We don't want our sign up steps to go under features, because the features, this is the feature folder. We want it to be under the step folder. So you can go back one step, you can click this arrow, okay, and go back one step. Then you go to this step folder or step definition folder. In open it, we already have our calculator step, but we don't have our sign up step. Then you save it, because if you click and save, it's going initially, if you had save it and we didn't pay attention to the last word over here, it would have saved under features folder and not under step folder. So let's save it now. So you can see here, this feature file has been saved under step file as step definition, and it has translated whatever we had here. Let me close this once. It has translated our code into this ones. Okay, line 9, given I'm on prep major. Then it has created a computer method for us. Okay, so we don't have to create this method to execute the action. This is where the action, a method contains a block of code that needs to be executed at runtime. Later explain those things. Line 15, and I choose register. It's created the same method for us, given I choose register. Then we add our code. Okay, so I'll leave you here. I don't know if there's any other question, and I sign up and rest a bit.
Hello, Kome. Good evening.
Yes.
I just want to ask a question. I know we downloaded Visual Studio 2022, but I was looking at Specflow documentation and I realized that the runner is not supported in 2022. They've stopped that. So if you are teaching with 2019, that means we might not be able to use the runner on 2022. Is there, so what do we do in this situation? Because the runner doesn't exist in 2022.
They call it differently. It does. It does the same thing. 1 second. Um, save. Um, give me 1 second.
Okay.
Mm. These days, it's even hard to find a 2017 before you could find it from their website, but I don't think they remove it from most places. Create a new project.
Yeah, I think 2019 can do it, but not 2022.
So Specflow project. C# practice. Don't be using numbers. So I'm just using it just to differentiate your badge. Just call it by your project name.
Okay.
Yeah. So which one did you said you didn't see here? Um
The runner
the
is not there.
the
You
runner.
only see
Yes.
the X unit. Yeah.
Yes. So over here somebody said he saw 6.0. Some people may not see the .NET Core as I mentioned, but for me in the 2022 year it still shows up. There's a way sometimes I think you can do to add it to the .NET Core, but let's choose the 3.0, or which one is 6.0 that the person was showing. Add fluent assertion. I'm going to leave that one out. We can add it later, but I'm using 2022 Visual Studio to create the project now.
Okay.
Mm.
So this is definitely N unit now.
If you select 3.0, go back to there, you see the other one you're looking for.
It is a 3.0 or 3.1.
So
Yeah, 3.0.
3.1 is the option you see, I think. So you can see in the 2023 Visual Studio, I have something a bit different. You still have the feature files, okay, where it will still have the template for you, calculator.feature. Okay. You will still have the step definition. You still have the calculator step definition. So let's go to the calculator step definition. You can see the calculator step definition is in there. And another thing they've added is implicit using. There's a way of using global global tools that makes things easier for you in the 2022 version. But we didn't have Specflow runner from the question our brother asked. And I told him that you can still add by going to this place. Where is it? You get packages. Okay. And let's type Specflow. Oh, I mean, what is installed? Let me go to browse. So we have a lot of Specflow NUnit runner, spec run. They all do things differently. Everyone then the way they use, but what is important is that the ones that people use a lot, you see the numbers like this one, 44.2 million. That means a lot of people use it. Specflow tools MS generation build, 27 million. That means a lot of people use it. Specflow N units, that means it was giving you N units, but it has a bit of Specflow to it. They have the original version, which is 3.9, and they have the beta version, which is the trial. Um, the living documentation is already stored, so you don't need it. They have the Specflow run, Specflow unit runners. Then what else? Specflow runner. So there are a lot of options based on what you want to use it for and what you want to do. A lot of Specflow features that you can add if you want to do Specflow run. If you want to install any of them, as I told you, this has already been installed, but although it's not showing, let me try the Specflow run here, which is that one. But that's not the main purpose of what I wanted to do today. But if you want to install, you can install, and it goes. If you want the fluent accession that we didn't, you see, I didn't choose fluent accession. That this is the fluent accession. If I want to add it, you can add it. So this is like a marketplace, and you can see here is getting that API and the libraries, and all those things will be installed. Once it get installed and you go to packages, you will see it here, Specflow run. Fluent accession is now being installed. You can install so many NuGet packages in here. So if you don't see it in your 2022, you can still do our BDD. Okay. Last question before I close the meeting. Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello. Any last question? Then we can
Yeah.
go.
My own is totally different from yours, so I don't know what's happening with my vision. It's different.
What is different?
When I click on the, because I choose the net.7 standard and the one page open.
Yeah.
Um,
Because today I won't look into those things. I just wanted to explain how BDD works. Okay.
okay.
Yes, when we start the real automation, we will use WebDriver commands and other thing. We create our first feature file, and I will give an example of how to do it properly. That way, I can give opportunity for people to share their screen. Then
Okay.
we'll do it. Yeah, just today, I just wanted to explain scenarios where you see TDD, where you see ATDD and BDD. And I wanted to show you how Visual Studio, if you are creating a project with BDD and Specflow, how it will look like. Okay. So
Okay.
once
No
we start
problem.
our project, I will actually, because most of you are using 2022, so I'll use 2022. We create our first project. That way, if somebody is missing out, I can let them share their screen, then we can have a look.
Oh,
Yeah.
Hello,
Yes.
Kwame.
Yeah.
Please, I'm getting the exception type system.exception was thrown when I'm trying to create the Specflow project.
Don't worry creating a project today, please.
Okay, okay.
Yes. I was just illustrating how BDD looks when we say giving when then. I was using a text file. and I'm
Okay, that's
trying to
all.
show you. Yes, because at the moment, most of you have your feature files and you are writing test cases. The business analysts have written some feature file, but I wanted to show you on the Visual Studio how it looks like and when those things translate into step definition. Okay, so don't worry about it. When we start our first automation, ideally, I will have to explain certain things in C sharp for you to have understanding. If not, a lot of people may not understand what I'm doing. And if you can create projects and you don't understand what you are doing, it's not helpful. You get it? Yeah. So I can't do the WebDriver command today. Friday, if I feel my chest is a bit better, we will look at Selenium WebDriver command, why we use it, why it's important. Then from there, maybe we will look at the first project, unless maybe somebody else will start the topic on the first project. All right. I will end the call here if Olu is there, unless can see Olatunde, your hand is up.